Hello and welcome to another episode of Leaders of Transformation. I had the privilege recently to meet Michael Arterberry. He is a motivational speaker. He's been doing it for many years. He's been working with adults. He's been working with teenagers since 2008. And I'm just really excited to have him here talking about his message of encouragement and empowerment. And so, Michael, welcome to Leaders of Transformation. We're excited that you're here today.
Yes, I'm excited to be here. With COVID and being locked in, any opportunity I can get to speak and kind of hear my voice, I take advantage of it. So yes, hopefully I won't overwhelm your audience.
No, well, we'll take all the fire and the passion. We love it. And it's
Okay.
funny because I have a few of my friends, and I am a speaker, but I'm not one of those people who ever desired the stage. And I know some of my friends do, and they're like, man, I'm getting withdrawals from, being on a stage and
Yeah,
pastors that are just used to, preaching every week. And they're like, man, it's just not the same on video, but they'll take whatever they can get.
you
So
got it.
yeah, we're ready for you. We're ready for you.
Okay.
And you know what?
All
I
right.
think the world needs, and your message of encouragement and motivation, I think the world needs that right now more than ever. And I know there's a lot more to your message, and we're going to unpack that. But I think that they need a little inspiration and a little fire, because positive fire and inspiration, because of all the stuff that's going on in the world. So bring it on.
All
So
right.
with
All
that,
right.
let's start off with you telling a little bit about your backstory, and we'll go from there.
Okay. All right. So I always like to start my podcast off telling a story. It's a great setup for us to go through and ask some questions. But it's about a farmer and a donkey. All right. And this donkey is one of his favorite farm animals, because after he finishes working with the donkey on the farm, he brings the donkey back home and he allows the donkey to play with his kids. So, imagine he's coming down the driveway, the kids come running out the house. They come out, they wash him, they ride him, and this becomes a normal ritual, And so one day he comes down the driveway, they come out, they play with the donkey, and then he releases them back out to the farm. While the donkey is out in the farm during the night, he wanders and falls into an empty water well. So when the farmer comes out the next morning, he whistles for him and he doesn't show. Starts calling his name, he doesn't show. So he starts walking around the farm and he finally hears him making noise at the bottom of this empty well. So he goes over, he sees him at the bottom of the well. And so he decides to get like 6 of his friends. They come over, they look in the well, and they're like, how are we going to get him out? And so one of his friends suggested that they get some rope and they're going to pull him out the well. So they all get some rope and they start to lasso the donkey. They throw the rope, they miss. They throw the rope, they miss. They finally throw it by his hind legs. He steps into the rope. They shimmy it up his body and they start to pull. They pull, the donkey moves. They pull, the donkey moves. They pull, the donkey moves. Then halfway up the well, they realize that the donkey's too heavy. So they lower him back to the bottom of the well, and now the farmer has to make a grim decision. Now, you see, he can't feed him food at the bottom of the well because that wouldn't make any sense for his family. He really can't starve him because he's more like a pet, so he's trying to really get it through his mind what he's going to do. Then one of his hot-headed friends was like, hey, just shoot him. He's like, no, that's too violent. I can't do that. So one of his more reasonable friends walked up beside him and he whispered in his ear and he said, listen, you don't want your kids to fall into the well. So we're going to have to sacrifice your donkey, but we're going to make sure that your kids are safe. We're going to cover him with dirt. You sacrifice him, but your kids will be okay. The farmer thought about it for a second. He said, all right, I can deal with that. So they all got shovels and they start shoveling the dirt. And every time that dirt hit the donkey would scream. Every time the donkey would scream, it would cause the farmer some distress. Dirt, scream, dirt, scream, dirt, scream. And then all of a sudden, the scream stopped. When the scream stopped, they gave the donkey a moment of silence. But they went back to work. More dirt, more dirt, more dirt. The next thing you know, you see the donkey's right here. They start shoveling cartoon style. The next thing you know, you see half his body. They keep shoveling and shoveling, and the next thing you know, Nicole, that donkey walks right out of the well that he fell into. Now check this out. Every time that dirt came across the wall, it would fall on the donkey's back. He would shake it off and he would step on it. And he took every scoop of dirt that was meant to kill him to save his life. So I tell you that story because I am the donkey. And what I would like to do with your audience and you is I want to share some of my dirt before we get into this. First and foremost, I grew up in a home with a raging alcoholic father. Now, when I say raging, I put the raging in front of it because it was severe. And he raged from the time I was born until the time he died when I was 16. To bring you into that world a little bit, I want you to imagine any time while I was growing up, I got caught up in having fun and the things that kids have fun. Always something would tap me on my shoulder and say, hey, buddy, don't you get too happy because you got to go home to that raging alcoholic dad. On top of having a raging alcoholic father, I grew up in poverty. Both my parents worked full time. My dad was a bus driver. My mother was a housekeeper. But his money went to drinking, and my mother ended up raising 4 kids with a housekeeping salary. So, we didn't really have much, you know what I'm saying? On top of not having much money, when you have an alcoholic dad as, sort of the head of the household, dysfunction. So, we're being raised by this alcoholic father. He'll rage at night. My mother put our clothes on in the morning. It's not like we go to therapy to offset it. So, growing up in that environment was crazy. But I'll finish with this. My passion is based on the fact that I was able to maneuver through all of that. And I use it as a catalyst because I've been able to take my wounds and my scars, and it's the energy that I use to walk beside people and encourage them to get to a better place. So, that's just a little bit of where I've come from, and we can expand and walk that out a little bit.
Yeah, well, thank you. I love that story of the donkey, by the way, and how you tie that to your own story. And that's why I think your story is so important now more than ever, because there's a lot of people that are feeling like there's been dirt on them. It may not look like what it looked like for you, but in their own way, they feel like it's pretty severe. It's pretty traumatic. It's this whole COVID, for example, situation. And people are saying, oh my gosh, like I can't go to my regular place, or I lost my job. And some of it is severe. And some of it's just inconveniences, but either way, it's how we interpret things. It's how we take them on. And what I hear from you is that you acknowledged what was actually going on and acknowledged the dysfunction, but didn't let it hold you back from moving forward. And what is, as a coach, I know that a lot of times people's purpose does come out of their pain. I believe God doesn't waste any experience. He certainly doesn't waste painful experiences. And so there's that blessing, there's that opportunity, not a blessing like, wow, I'm so glad that happened, but there's an opportunity that can come out of it. And you've certainly done that. And now you work with schools and you go into and work with kids. So can you talk a little bit about those workshops that you do, working with the youth and bringing about peace and reconciliation, how you bring this message of encouragement to them?
Yes, what I do is, and it's really timely in the sense that what I'm about to explain, I've been doing, like you said, 2006, 2008. So I've actually been doing the groundwork to help some of the swells of what you hear in the communities today. Because what I do with my program is, if you were a principal of a school, I come to you and I ask for 25 to 30 students that make up what's in your building. So that group of kids is the white student, the black student, the jock, the honor roll student. And I put them in a room and I run them through. It's 4 days in total, but 2 days at a time. It's an experiential experience where what these students get to do is they get to come together and they get to know themselves on an individual level, but at the same time, they get to build relationships with people they wouldn't normally hang out with. Now, what I do in these workshops is the fact that first and foremost, I feel that we are products of our thought lives. So I'm really focusing on getting these young people to understand that you have control of holding thoughts or kicking thoughts out. All right. Not only that, I'm a firm believer that we go through life and we step on landmines, and the landmine doesn't blow you up, but it creates injuries. And what we have a tendency to do is we start to make decisions based on our injuries in real time rather than what has happened to us. And so what I do with these activities is I walk them through their lives and have them say to themselves, whoa, I stepped on that landmine when I was 7. I'm 14. I can't get it together in school, and I'm making my decisions based on something in my past and not something that's going on right in front of me. And so, it's so like an example of an activity, so I can kind of put some meat on the bones for you, is I do this activity with them I call Who Am I? So what I have them do, Nicole, is I have them write down 10 words that describe who they are, positive and negative. And I tell them that, listen, nobody will know what you write. Once they get the 10 words down, then what I do is I have them prioritize it from least important to most important. Once they prioritize them, I run them through a script. Now, each word, they flip it over and I start to talk to them. How does it affect your life? How does it affect your relationships? When they're finished with the word, I have them crumble it up and drop it on the floor. Now, everything I do is in a circle, and so they're dropping it on the floor in front of them. Once all 10 papers are done, we've gone through the script, I have them pick up the ones they want, but leave the ones they don't want on the floor. And then we start to process it. First and foremost, Nicole, kids and adults that do this as well, tears. Because see, we do things in life, but we have no idea how it's being projected to the world. As I start to explain to them how that word starts to integrate into their personalities, it's earth shattering, and then when it's complete, what that activity gives them the ability to have, and I think it's really good with people in general, is when you feel like you don't have control of your life, it's like tires on a car spinning. I'm in the Northeast, so I'm going to say ice. You know what I'm saying? It's a winter storm and your wheels are spinning on the ice. But when you go through activities like that and you start to get some clarity to what's going on in your life, you get traction. See, when you start to get traction and you start to put pieces together, that spinning starts to dwindle. With kids and adults, the voices start to quiet. And when the voices start to quiet, you're able to progress and move in a positive direction.
Oh, I love it. You're talking my language. I can see the impact that you are having on them, and I love it. Yes, I actually am from Canada, from Toronto, so I know all about ice interaction and spinning wheels. I know that in the physical. I also know that in the mental as well. I've certainly been there. You talked about something that I want to unpack a little bit more, that I think there's actually several things that we can unpack. But the first thing is you talked about these landmines and people, that we make decisions based on those past experiences and landmines. How do you, without a lot of therapy, right? Because that's not what you're doing. How do you get them past it and beyond it, so that they're beyond it, but have addressed it enough to be healed from it so that it doesn't continue to sneak back later?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, good question. Let me unpack this for you. First and foremost, what I do is I walk them through my story. Nicole, when I open up a workshop, I have a picture of the house I grew up in. And it looks old, beat up, boards on the window, and it's exactly the way it was when I lived there. So I walk them through how it was for me to live there, but then I show them the house that I live in now. So what I do is, first and foremost, is and when I use this term, I'm saying I strip naked. I bare myself. I let them know that the person that's leading this group is a broken vessel. So I've done it myself. So what that does is it disarms them immediately. You can see the room I'm talking about. This is the first 5-10 minutes of the workshop. They're totally disarmed because no longer are they looking at me as this perfectionist who's coming to make them feel perfect. But what I do is I use the language as we're going through the process is that I'm going to allow you to go back. I'm going to allow you to visit it, but you're not allowed to stay. And every time we go through an activity where I feel as if we had to walk back to the past, I tell them, touch it, feel it, but you can't stay. To the point where at the end, if a kid I feel has not come back far enough, and I have a social work degree. So when you say it's not therapy, but it's therapeutic, I have the knowledge to know, you know what, that kid, let me go get the principal or the counselor, you know, and there's times where kids don't go home, Nicole. You know, like they drop bombs in my room where it's like, hey, you know, listen, I pull them to the side, I say, sorry, you know, I don't mean to do this to you, but I can't allow you to go home to what you just told me. But what they do is when they go back through those steps, you know, it's heavy, but it's freeing. You know what I'm saying? It's freeing, and if you use it in a positive way, you know. And I'll tell you this: it's to me, it's the quality of life. So, like my sister grew up in that dysfunctional home, like I did, right? So she's 12 years older than me, and she started going to counseling. So she goes to counseling, and she's starting to talk about all this stuff that went on in our house because we could have made movies with the stuff that was going on in my house. I'm telling you. And so she calls me up, and she's like, Michael, I'm loving it, you know, feeling light, you know, and she, you know, the first few, then I got the call. She was like, I'm not going back. And I'm like, sis, why aren't you going back? She's like, 60-something years old. I've been dealing with it this many years. Now, what happened is the therapist started really poking on some spots she didn't like. And I didn't push her to go. But I'm saying this when I talk about quality of life. My sister has no idea at 63 that if she would have continued on that path of therapy, how much more of a quality life she could live. The pain is temporary, but the victory is forever.
Amen. Well, and I think that when you talked about that contrast from where you started to where you live now, I don't know if you live in a mansion, it doesn't matter though, but you see that contrast.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a scripture in the Bible that says where there is no vision, the people perish.
Yeah.
And so if you don't have anything to look forward to and there's no possibility, then how can you make it happen? How can you bring it into fruition? Because you don't even know what it looks like. And so for you to be able to do this, and also at a young, when you work with the youth, and of course I know you work with adults too, but going through this and at a younger age being able to heal these things is, I mean, it's way better to do it at that age than to be 60s and 70s and whatever to have to deal with it then. I want to shift gears because you alluded to it. Obviously, you live in that space of, you know, dealing with all the stuff that's going on, the unrest, the racial unrest and dissension, right? A lot of misunderstanding going on. And I'm sure you see it, like you said, like when you bring kids into the room, you're seeing all of this. Now, you're not just talking about color of skin, right? You talked about grades, all economic situations and all of that. How, what would you tell, because obviously we got a lot of this crazy going on in the US. Now, not all our listeners are from the US, but you probably have heard it on the news, what's going on here. And it is happening in your countries as well, right? The other countries. And so I think it's important to talk about how, what you do in the room, it's like I see it like as a microcosm of the world.
Yeah. No, right? It is. Yeah, no, it is. And listen, you ask great questions. I'm getting goosebumps, Nicole. So can I explain to you what I do in this room?
Go for it.
Check this out. This is one of the activities I do. It's beautiful. I call it concentric circles. And what I do, now remember, you just set it up. It's the world. You got the jock, you got the goth, you got them in a room. They've never really spoken to each other. I put them in an inside circle and an outside circle, and I run them through 5 questions. The first question, and they're going to talk to each other, and I'm going to rotate them. 5 different people, 5 different questions. The first question is a person I respect and why I respect them. Qualities that I look for in a friend and why. If I had the power to change something in the world, what would it be and why? A time I felt most hurt by someone I trusted, and a time that I lost someone I really cared about. Now, they sound really basic, but imagine the microcosm of the world. They shift and they go through the 5 different people. They have 1 minute to talk about each subject. And then I put them back out to the circle, Nicole. Let me tell you something. The first minute, I don't even say anything. After the 5 questions, I just let them sit and just allow that feeling to marinate. And then I ask, do you feel it? And they all just say yes. The room shifts. Now, let me tell you how it shifts. When they came into the room and they looked around the circle, everyone was a face. 5 questions later, 20 minutes later, each face now becomes a person. Now, when you talk about what's going on in the world, they now know that the black guy is not just a black guy, he's a person. You treat a person different than you treat a face.
That is true.
If the world could understand that concept, I'm not a black man, I'm a person. Get to know the person first, it would be a totally different dynamic. You know, I had an Italian girl who was in my group who stopped it. Like, she stopped the group like, listen, I need to step on this platform and use it. She said, I wouldn't talk to any of you if we weren't in this room. And we're looking at her like, yo, could you fix that? Because you can't leave that hanging there, But then, you know what? But she said, I feel like I love all of you. And then, what was really beautiful is when she was a senior, and when she had her prom bus, Nicole, it was multicultural. She was sending me pictures. Her bus was all different ethnic groups. That experience changed her perception on the world. If people listen,
that's transformation.
Yeah, right there. See, people keep moving so quickly, and then the ones that want to fight what's going on in society, the way you can fight not dealing with problems in your life and issues is to keep moving. And so people keep busy because busy requires you not to think, and so it doesn't settle in. You know what I'm saying? And so, but that's how and so now imagine I do that activity. It's a 2-day program. That's done like the first half of day 1. And girl, from that point forward, we go in. I have kids that come into my workshops that grew up together since kindergarten. And when they finish the 2-day experience, they're like, yo, I didn't know. I saw you every day. We ate lunch every day. You come to my house, but I didn't know.
That's a great point, because we have social media, we have all these different communication tools, but how often do people really have the real conversations? I like real conversations. I don't do surface stuff really well. I'm not really great at parties for just like the small talk. Actually, I've had several times where I've met people over the years who didn't know me, but they were observant, and they're like, Nicole, you're deep. I'm like, I haven't said anything yet. They just know somehow that Nicole's going to go deep. I'm not going to ask you, I love sports and baseball is great and whatever, but I use this example. I'm like, I'm not going to ask you what the baseball, or we're not going to talk about the baseball score.
Yeah.
Right. I want to get to know you. I want to learn more about you. I want to understand you. And that's just kind of always been my nature. And I think that has almost been a drawback, because as all this is happening, being a Canadian, coming down to the US, and I'm like, what the heck is going on? Because in my mind, I just have always sought to understand. But then, of course, that's why I do what I do too.
Yeah.
Right. So it creates a flat spot for me because I can't imagine that people don't operate that way, that they make such decisions or that they choose, like you said, I'm a black man. And it's like people don't see you. They don't see you as a person. They see you as a black man. And it's like, to me, I go, how can you, you know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of not in the frame, right?
Doesn't fit.
So, but I was just thinking as you were describing this with the 5 questions, you said they're simple questions. Those are not simple questions, my friend. Those are deep questions, my kind of questions. And I was just thinking, I was like, man, can we just get like about 330 million people
in circles,
into circles like that? I had somebody on my show a few months ago, Jeremy Scrivens, and he is he creates social rooms, and he works through he uses a tool called appreciative inquiry. So he works with companies and helping to bring everybody in the company into the conversation, like what we're talking about here, but on a different, like in a different way. But they certainly do get to know each other, everything. And he said leaders, the leaders are the heroes. You know, we always think of leaders and we look up to them. The leaders are now hosts of conversations. Those are the next, I forget exactly how he said it, but those are the real heroes, is hosting conversations, bringing people together. And so, like I said, we start off is this idea that there's a lot of social media, but it's all this surface stuff, and everybody's putting on the mask, and everybody's, you know, wanting to look good and show the highlight reel, or they go the other way, and then people don't know what to do with that because they're like so vulnerable that people are like, whoa, and there's no context for it. So as much as we kind of joke and say it would be great to get the entire population into this conversation, the question is, how do we actually do that? Because that literally is what needs to happen in order to create a shift. So where does that begin? You know what I mean?
Well, what enables me to be able to do it is the same in the world. It's small steps. You know, when I talk about people setting goals, and you know this as a coach, you have to break off small pieces, because I use an analogy of a pizza. You know, a pizza comes to your house, you're home alone, you eat one slice at a time and you stop when you're full because that's what you do. But if you mess around and the pizza comes and you try to eat the entire pizza, you're going to get a bellyache. And it's the same thing with the world. When you digest something, you have to break it off into small pieces so that you're able to take it in. So these kids and the people that come into my group are able to build off of the small pieces so that they're able to get the bigger picture. What people have to do in the way society is now is to walk slowly, but like you said, with a vision in a direction. So, rather than rushing to get a group together and moving quickly, it's small pieces. It's being able to break it off so that I can feed you enough to taste it. But I don't, like for me, if I like the way something tastes and I eat too much of it, I lose the ability to enjoy it. So that's the same when people learn. You know what I'm saying? If I bring you into a room to talk about a topic that you're uncomfortable about, what I'll do is I'll feed you just enough where you kind of get to the point where you want to push away from the table, and I'll stop and say, take that, go home. Take that, go home, chew on it for a little while. They'll come back into that room because you didn't push anything on them. Curious now, come on, give me some more. Then what you do is, and it's a little at a time. I'll tell you this though, for as far as, dealing with and I don't want to stay there. I'm going to drop this, and let's promise that we won't stay on the subject, because we could talk about this for a whole podcast. And when you talk about small talk, Nicole, we cut from the same cloth, honey. I'm terrible. I'm so bad that if I'm in a party and you're talking garbage, I may jump in and shut you down, because I'm just like, listen, you're filling the air with this noise. I don't feel like hearing it. But anyway, what I'm saying is, oh man, I jumped off the point. But what I'm saying is just whites that want to understand some of the anger of the African American community have to open a book.
Thank
They
you. I was
don't
going to
under-
ask you that.
Yeah,
What books?
Yeah,
would you
well, I
recommend?
mean, just the history books.
Yeah.
They have to go back. What some whites that are not acclimated to where the history of the African American community comes from, they see the anger on television and they think the anger is based on what just happened in real time, not understanding that it's based on years and years of oppression. So not looting and all that stuff I'm not saying that I agree with that, but the anger of those that protest peacefully is check this out. Let me tell you this real
It's
quick.
the minefield you were talking about.
Yeah.
And
I was reading an article on Facebook. It was a honor roll history teacher dispelling Confederacy. Line by line, whatever the Confederacy stood for, they would debunk it. But what they would do, which was nice, is they would bring in an African American innovator or a life changer on each level. But 52 years old I am, Nicole, when I finished the article, you know what I realized? In school, the only thing I was taught is that I was freed as a slave, and then I got fed a little bit of Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks during Black History Month. That's all I was told. So if no one else in my home was telling me anything else, and I promised from that article that I would never talk to another audience with Black and brown students and not tell them that they're kings and queens as well.
Yes.
They're kings and queens as well, Nicole.
Yes.
And then they wonder why these communities have the violence. If you walk around and all you think that you were a slave and you were freed, and Jimmy down the block has a nice car because he sells freaking drugs, what do you think you're going to do? So, it's multi-layered, and like I said, I don't want to get caught on that, because that.
Well, it is a hot issue right now, and so we're there. And I think it's worth talking about.
Right.
It's interesting. There's a book that doesn't speak to this directly, but it's actually a faith-based book, but it's called Orphan, Slave, Son, and it is powerful. And that's son, daughter, for the ladies, don't get all caught up with that son.
Yeah.
Okay. But so I can say that I'm female, right? So, but it's this idea that there are people that walk around, and even when we're talking about people that believe in God, that walk around like orphans, that believe deep down inside, that don't know it consciously, but that subconsciously see themselves as orphans.
Yeah.
And then there are those that see themselves as slaves.
Yeah.
And they may be freed, but like you said, it's like, I see myself as a freed slave. That's very different than seeing myself as a son or daughter of a king. Or being a king in your own life. And so it's so powerful, so different. So you talked about reading books. I think getting into these conversations, it's interesting right now, we have kind of this, it's like two extremes, right? There's the, to your analogy about the pizza, it's like there's certain people that are starving, like they're not even in the conversation. They're not even eating a piece of the pizza, right? There's none of that going on. But then there's the other side, which is like trying to jam the entire pizza down people's throats. Right. People are like, what just happened? What did I do? And so there's like this, this spread, this gap between that, and it's looking at how do we bring that together. But any further thoughts on that before I want to talk about your book, which is
no, that's good. Let's leave that there.
Okay. And you mentioned about reading books on history and just studying and just going back and reading true history. So like not the watered down books that only show it the one way, but just show it both ways. I think that's important. Let's talk about your book. So Be Encouraged, 250 Days of Motivation and Encouragement. Why 250 days and what is it about?
All right. So 250 days, because the inspiration of the book was when we talking about our faith. I spend time with God every morning, and after my time with God, I write something to the world. And what I was doing for years is I would do my quiet time, write something, put it on my Facebook page, and I would just give it to my followers. You know what I'm saying? A woman dying of cancer sent me a message on the inbox, and she said, you know, Michael, I would love to have all your stuff in one place. And I said, whoa, what a great idea. So Nicole, I went and I started pulling my favorites. And as I started to put it together, I was going to do a yearly devotional. But then I thought about something. I get caught up when I read devotionals if I miss the day before. Because I'm like, oh, it's Monday, it's the 12th. I can't read the 12th. I'm like, I want to read it, but I mean, really, it's like, so something that minor. I said, you know what, rather than 365, I made it 250. But what I did is I put the book together so that this woman could have the words in one place, and I dedicated it to her. So in the inside, you'll see that it's dedicated to who, you know, the woman that I asked. And, you know, my book is about this. And I love that you are a believer, because I can drop it on you like real talk. I commune with God, so I'm sent out to the world to present myself as him. I'm a firm believer that for some people, I may be the closest thing that they may ever get to God. So I take that serious in the physical and also what I write. So my words are written so that they are able to comfort a person as if they were being touched by our Heavenly Father, you know? So it comes out of my quiet time. So I'm coming fresh out of his bosom. So when I put it on the page, it is, I mean, you know, for a believer, I'm talking about, it has all his spices on it, you know what I mean? So, you know, and I don't want to freak people out. Even if you're not a believer, the page is still inspirational. It's not, it's not God. I'm telling you where it's based in, like, but you know, it's inspired from a place of a man that, you know, I'll say this to you, is that when we talk about our walk, I feel like what I went through as a child, the enemy saw my future. See, the reason why I tell the story in the beginning about the raging alcoholic father is the enemy saw that I was going to be successful. And so he came to get me young. He wanted to stop me when I was young. That's why my message is so powerful now, because I endured it, and now I'm a soldier and I just bring it to the world.
Yes, and yes, absolutely. And that's a great place to end and to encourage our listeners to go get a copy of your book. I love what you said there, that it's not all about God. The thing is that if you feel like you have to throw that in a lot, then, you know, it sometimes can feel contrived, you know what I mean? Like trying to push something on people, and it's not about that. It is about coming out of that wellspring. What I hear is it's coming out of the wellspring, your heart. And like you said, it's got its spices all over it. You know, it's interesting that when you hear something that is of pure love, God is love, and you hear something that is of pure love and grace, it resonates differently in the heart. And that's what I'm hearing about your book, that it resonates differently because of where it's coming from when you wrote it. And so very, very powerful. So I would encourage our listeners to get a copy of Michael's book. We'll make sure it's in the show notes, of course. Michael Arterberry, let's try that again. michaelarterberry.com, and the other website for going into the schools and his program there is youthvoicescenter.org. But again, those will be in the notes as well on Leaders of Transformation. But Michael, thank you so much. Thank you for what you're doing, because you are a microcosm and you are the ripple effect of what you do with these kids. You will never see the impact. You will never see the full impact and harvest of that. But there's a huge ripple effect that is going out from that. Every person that you transform, every person that heals and starts to see themselves differently, starts to see others differently, and starts building better relationships and seeking to understand, goes out and teaches that, and by example shares that with their friends and demonstrates that, creates another ripple and another ripple and another ripple. It's called procession. And so that's what you're creating in the world. And it's just incredible. You are truly a leader of transformation. And I kind of half joking, but I'm half serious. It's like, we need to get those concentric circles going on a much larger scale, let's just say. So again, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you to our listeners for being here. I hope this has inspired you, put a little bit of juice in there. Maybe you just need to be encouraged that wherever you are, you can climb out of it, right? You can get beyond it. And as Michael has shared, you know, sometimes those painful experiences, oftentimes they are the building block. They're exactly what you needed to be strong, to build character, to be able to share your message. And I do believe that every single person is capable of being a leader of transformation, because deep inside you, you are a creator. You're going to create something. The question is, what are you creating? You're going to transform something. The question is, what are you going to transform? Every conversation that you're in with someone else, you are creating something. And so ask yourself the next time, what am I creating? Am I creating intimacy? Am I creating connection? Or am I separating us? Am I dividing us? Am I seeing us as separate and different and, you know, somebody that I don't want to meet? You get that choice with every single person. Those 5 questions, maybe you want to write those questions down. Ask yourself those questions. Maybe start with some of the people in your core circle and start asking them some of the questions. Practice with them and start to hear some people that, just like Michael talked about, some of the people that you may have grown up with, but you've never asked these questions. You've never gone this deep with them. And if you begin to start the conversation there, you'll be amazed at what you learn, but you'll also start that ripple effect out in your own life. And so I encourage you that. We'd love to hear your stories. You can go on leadersoftransformation.com, find us there, send us a message. You, of course, can find us on social as well. And we just really appreciate you being here. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Leaders of Transformation real soon.
All right. Thank you, Nicole.